friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
So, Insomniac Spider-Man 2 came out last year, and I played it and thought to myself, this seems kinda familiar. They had already done the symbiote takes over the city thing before in Spider-Man games, multiple times. Back in 2008, Spider-Man Web of Shadows came out during the height of what I like to call the black suit era of Spider-Man, popularized by the release of Spider-Man 3. The black suit was featured in every Spider-Man thing at the time, the movies, TV, and especially the games.
I've loved Spider-Man since I was a kid because of that first Spider-Man movie, so obviously I picked up every Spider-Man game I could get my hands on.
Mamma mia!
Especially this one. This was a favorite of mine since I was a kid, but I haven't played it in years, so let's see if it still holds up today.
Web of Shadows begins with a hilariously bad cold open with a symbiote-ravaged New York City. After Spider-Man swings around for a hot minute, we get to hear one of the worst Spider-Man voices of all time.
Where's Cage and his search party? The civilian volunteers! Pretty redhead, arming a cast! You are no help!
We'll talk more about that later. Spider-Man is searching for Mary Jane, and when he finds her, she's disgusted by him. This causes him to be engulfed by some symbiote. Flashback to a couple days earlier where Spider-Man is fighting Venom and absorbs the black suit from him. He proceeds to kick Venom's ass and reunite with an injured Mary Jane, who he follows to the hospital. Once he arrives, the hospital is caught in the middle of a gang war. Spider-Man teams up with Luke Cage to put a stop to it. Apparently, this gang war is a problem throughout Harlem, and through a long series of tutorials and Spider-Man acting dumb,
I got bitten by a spider.
No.
Yeah.
he and Luke come up with a plan to create a truce between the gangs. This leads to the first instance of the choose a path mechanic, where you can choose to either act like Spider-Man or be a complete asswipe to everyone around you. The overarching plot doesn't change at all based on these decisions, but it does affect your immediate allies and conversations. For the rest of this summary, I'm going to explain with the choices that I made. During the truce, Spider-Man finds out the whole gang war was set up by the Kingpin, so he goes to confront him and runs into Black Cat. After a long chase and boss fight, she's all like,
"You gotta give him that huck too and spit on that thing."
So Spider-Man works with Black Cat to be a general pain in the ass for Kingpin, until a while later, Spider-Man runs into some symbiote-infected citizens. Spider-Man is then confronted by Wolverine, because Spidey smells like the infected people, obviously due to his own symbiote. Together they find Venom and see he's been abducting citizens and turning them into symbiote monsters. The infection gets so bad that a SHIELD team led by Black Widow puts a perimeter around New York City. The inconvenient absence of Iron Man and Mr. Fantastic cause Spider-Man to reluctantly break the Tinkerer out of jail in order to come up with a plan to stop the symbiote outbreak. After this, Spider-Man and Tinkerer are taken into custody by SHIELD, and they all agree to team up to stop the infection.
What do you want, Spider-Man?
They decide to have Tinkerer build a machine that will send out a sonic wave that will destroy all the symbiotes and save all the people. The next couple hours of the game consist of Spider-Man and SHIELD fighting off the symbiotes, and Spider-Man having to fight his previous allies and villains possessed by the symbiote, such as Electro, Wolverine, Black Cat, and Vulture. This brings us back to the cold open, where MJ begs Peter not to use the black suit again, but he's overwhelmed by symbiotes and left with no choice. Spider-Man uses the black suit one last time to stop a symbiotic Vulture and activate Tinkerer's machine. It looks like all is well until they receive news that Venom is on board the helicarrier and has taken control of the whole thing. Spider-Man goes up there and reasons with Eddie, causing him to sacrifice himself and the helicarrier in a violent explosion that ends the symbiote threat once and for all. Peter and MJ reunite and swing off into the sunset, and that's Spider-Man Web of Shadows.
Wait, there's no free roam after you finish the game?
Honestly, the story in this game is kinda poopy. My wiener did not get hard one time, except for that one time Black Cat showed up and gave me that hot tuh! Not only is this a retread of a previously used concept from an older Spider-Man game, but now you can be needlessly edgy. Like, people die in this game. My two problems with this story are nobody is likable, and Venom is not a good overarching villain. Almost all of your allies seem more annoyed by Spider-Man's presence than anything else, and Spidey himself sounds like a whiny jerk. He doesn't have any of the endearing qualities that make him likable in the first place, and he's not funny enough to make up for it. He'll talk to Mary Jane on the phone occasionally, and this is one of the worst MJ portrayals too. She completely cuts off Peter when she finds out he has the black suit, and Peter doesn't connect with anyone else, so there's little incentive to save the city, her, or anyone for that matter. Venom is barely in the game at all, so you don't get the feeling of wanting to beat a villain that taunts you the entire game, like in Ocarina of Time or Banjo-Kazooie. You see him once at the start, once in the middle, and then at the very end. You hear about him the entire time and slowly watch the city get infected, but Venom is nowhere to be found, so there's no meaningful connection between the hero and the villain. Coming back to Spider-Man's voice, it is the most obnoxious and whiny Spider-Man voice I've ever heard, and it adds tenfold to how unlikable Spider-Man is. It just doesn't sound like Spider-Man to me, and it's probably my biggest problem with the entire game. You know what else? This game is fucking ugly. All the graphics are bland and washed out, the character designs are ugly and bland too. I especially hate Spider-Man's costume with its tiny eyes and logos. Wait a minute, why are there two kingpins on my screen right now? I normally like my combat in games to be more grounded and based in interesting choreography like the Arkham games or Sifu, but this game has Spider-Man shooting lasers out of his hands with crazy particle effects and shit. I mean, it works with the black suit with all of its tendrils and stuff, and I like that, but I would have liked it if the red suit had a more grounded combat style.
I can't harp on it too much, however, because god damn if this isn't one of the most fun Spider-Man games I've ever played.
I know I've been mostly negative up to this point, but no longer. This game knocks it out of the park in terms of gameplay. The movement and combat are some of my favorite in the series. Let's start with the movement. Like most Spider-Man games, you swing with R2 and it feels fast and fluid. I know lots of you Spider-Man nerds like it when the webs actually attach to buildings, and you'll be happy to know that they do for the most part. There are these spider emblem things all over the city, and if you collect enough of them, then you'll level up, and big emphasis on I think it increases your swing speed, so be sure to nab them. Two things I think this game has over even modern Spider-Man games is the web zipping and wall climbing mechanics. Most Spider-Man games only have web zips that bring you forward, but in Web of Shadows, if you tap the web zip button without holding a direction, he'll zip straight up. In other Spider-Man games, gaining height quickly can be an issue, but not here.
You just press that button and Spider-Man goes, ooh.
At first, I thought wall climbing would be a problem because I would constantly crash into walls but wouldn't stick to them. Then I learned there are two separate buttons for sticking to walls, one for wall climbing and one for wall running. This adds an extra layer of control in terms of Spider-Man's movement that I think is still unrivaled today. I think my favorite movement is still Spider-Man 2 on PS5 due to the style, but Web of Shadows is definitely a close second. Whoa, I didn't mean to walk in on your circle jerk over here. One of the main mechanics of the game is being able to switch between the red and black suit whenever you want and utilizing their different movesets. The red suit is more about quick damaging attacks and webbing up enemies, while the black suit has more of a crowd control kind of moveset. This game has a great upgrade tree that stays engaging for a majority of the game with tons of unlockable abilities and combat options. It even has an auto upgrade feature where the game will spend your experience for you so you don't even have to worry about it if you don't want to. I found myself enjoying the black suit more due to its overwhelming power and its pulling tendril attack that keeps enemies close to me. Both suits have unique movesets for on the ground, on a wall, or airborne, and while I think the wall combat is kinda clunky, everything else works really well and is pretty fun. The thing that strings everything together is the web strike. Spider-Man can web towards any enemies and do a number of things, such as bounce off them, throw them, or even combo attacks on them. You can continually web strike from enemy to enemy, and it adds incredible flow to the combat. You never have to stop moving and can take care of threats quickly if you perform it right. There are a number of fights that take place exclusively in the air, and with the web strike you can just jump from enemy to enemy and stay in the air with little trouble. I think this is a brilliant mechanic and should have been brought back for every Spider-Man game, but they dropped it for some reason. The Insomniac Spider-Man games sort of have it, but they don't bounce off enemies, so it's not as good. The combination of movement and combat make this game fun and satisfying throughout the entire playthrough. The game's structure consists of Spider-Man getting missions from his current ally over and over again until the story progresses. There's tons of optional missions that you can do, most of which being beat a number of enemies or save a number of civilians, but like I said, these are optional, so if you want to just play through the story, then you can. Most of the main missions are combat related too. There's not a ton of variety in the things you do, but it's not necessarily a bad thing due to the main gameplay being so fun. You may have noticed this icon at the bottom right that shows Spider-Man either in the red suit or the black suit. This represents your current morality alignment, red being heroic and black being more villainous. When you make a decision in the story, your alignment will instantly change based on your decision, but you can also change it through gameplay. If you do things like save civilians and stop crimes, then you'll get red points, but if you ignore these things and destroy property, then you'll get black points. It also changes very slightly based on which suit you're using, but not a whole lot, so you can use whichever suit you like more and not have to worry about the morality. The only thing your alignment has effect on is which allies you can summon to help you in battle. Obviously, heroic summons heroes and villainous summons villains. Once summoned, an ally will appear and help you in battle, but you can't control or direct them, so it's not very useful. This mechanic is so pointless that I barely used it. I used it a couple times for footage, but that's it. Moving on, lastly I'm gonna talk briefly about the boss fights. Most of them are just like fighting a beefed up normal enemy with more health. They have a couple unique attacks and all that, but honestly they're nothing special. Later on in the game, lots of your allies become infected with the symbiote and you have to fight them as bosses, and it's kinda cool, but other than that, I'm indifferent to the boss fights.
That game was great!
Apart from the story and graphics, I loved this game. The movement is fast and fun, and the combat hits hard and is fluent with the phenomenal web strike mechanic. As far as Spider-Man games go, I think I like the solid design of Shattered Dimensions DS and the large variety of Insomniac Spider-Man more than this, but that doesn't stop this from being just a straight up fun game from start to finish.
I think it's about time we start wrapping up here. So, thank you all for watching, and
since I figured I'm never gonna go out of the way to make individual videos for these versions of the game, I guess I'm gonna talk about them here. Alongside the main releases of Web of Shadows on the Xbox 360, PS3, and the Wii, came the Amazing Allies Edition, released on the PS2 and PSP, as well as the DS version, which was simply named Web of Shadows. Both are 2D side-scrollers and are quite different from the main console versions in terms of gameplay.
I'm gonna talk about the Amazing Allies Edition first. Halo Wars? What the f***?
What is this world coming to?
The story for both games is pretty similar to the main version, so I'm gonna skip them. It's the same Venom and symbiote taking over the city stuff. Like I said before, Amazing Allies is a very simple 2D side-scroller where your goal is just to make it to the end of every level. You'd think that wouldn't be so bad, but...
This is one of the worst games I've played on the channel so far.
Graphically, the game is also pretty washed out and ugly like the main version, but now with PS2 graphics. At least the suit looks alright here. My biggest issues with this game are the controls and the repetitive nature of the gameplay. I was struggling with the controls almost the entire time. Controlling Spider-Man feels very sloppy, like there's a delay to your input, so I was struggling to keep balance on the simplest of platforming. The jumping felt very heavy, meaning you carry lots of momentum and miss tons of platforms. Worsening this problem is the finicky climbing. Sticking to walls never felt right, and if you wanted to climb up certain platforms, Spider-Man would jump away instead of continuing to climb over the ledge, and it was obnoxious as hell, especially on this train level. The worst part is, navigating these levels is all you're doing here, so I was just battling the controls for a very boring 4 hours. Like the main version of the game, you can switch between the red and black suit at any time, and they have different movesets. The black suit can smash through walls and floors, and the red suit can shoot web lines, I guess. Problem is, the upgrades for each suit is based on the morality system. This game has tons and tons of dialogue trees that you have to read and make decisions for. Most of the time, there are 3 choices: a neutral choice, a red choice where you act like Spider-Man, and a black choice where you act like a total dick. You get experience towards that specific suit based on your choices, so by the end of the game, me wanting to act like Spider-Man made my red suit way more powerful than the black suit, therefore I barely used it. You may be wondering why this is called the Amazing Allies Edition. Well, at all times at the top right of the screen, you have access to these assists or power-ups. These vary from basic healing or strength power-ups to calling in help from another hero acting as a screen nuke.
I barely used it.
I forgot it was even there a majority of the time, so it went mostly unused. A couple good things I want to talk about before wrapping up the PS2 version. Firstly, I quite enjoyed the combat despite how simplistic it was. Spider-Man has basic punch and kick buttons, but the reason I enjoyed it so much was the sound effects. It just sounds really nice hitting things in this game. Secondly, this game has really good writing. It's all text-based, but the stuff here can be pretty funny at times.
And away we go!
There's a scene where Spider-Man is talking to an AIM agent who wants to quit his job, and another scene where this person goes on a long spew about how they hate their life of crime, and you'd think Spider-Man would convince them to quit, but nope, they attack you at the end anyway. Apparently, Spider-Man feels the need to take a taxi at one point in the game. Overall, I think this version of the game is the funniest of the 3, and I enjoyed that aspect of it.
Whew! Finally beat that final boss. Now let's see that ending cutscene.
Let's just move on to the DS version now. Keep in mind, the only way I can record DS footage is with my poopy PC, so I only recorded about 20 minutes of gameplay, but I did finish the game on my actual DS.
Also, sorry if the gameplay is laggy. Poopy PC.
This was developed by Kryptonite Games, the same people who made Shattered Dimensions on DS. Since this was the predecessor to one of my favorite games of all time, my hopes were high. Starting off, the graphics have the same problem as the other versions, being bland and washed out, but this one has it even worse due to the extremely boring environments consisting of sewer and symbiote-covered city. The gameplay picks up the slack though. It's got the same tight movement and combat from Shattered Dimensions, Spidey's jumps and swings feel great, and the web zip being able to snap to any surface is amazing. The combat is fast and challenging but rewarding. You build up a momentum meter by continually hitting enemies without being hit yourself, and this grants you more experience. I love how lots of the moves combo into each other, like the uppercut, into the jackhammer stomp, into the bounce-off attack. Like the other games, you can switch between the red and black suit at the push of a button, and they have different movesets. The red suit has the web zip, and the black suit has a dash attack that can smash through walls. I do find the black suit to be generally worse for traversal since it doesn't have the web zip, but it's not a huge deal. Surprisingly, this is the only version of the game without a morale system. You do pick up some allies, but they can only be used sparingly in boss fights. This game is a Metroidvania like Shattered Dimensions, but that's where my problems begin to arise. The map system sucks ass in this game. Unlike Shattered Dimensions, it doesn't show your location, areas you've been to, or the location of upgrades. It only shows the layout of the general area you're in, and this is a huge step down from even the earliest of Metroid games like Super Super Metroid. Another problem is receiving upgrades. In Shattered Dimensions, you found upgrades throughout the world, and this had a domino effect of finding upgrades that can open access to even more upgrades and so on. In Web of Shadows, you gain experience and purchase upgrades, so you don't get that satisfying domino effect, and it often feels like the difficulty is outpacing how fast you can upgrade. Later on in the game, I was struggling with basic groups of enemies because they dogpile you, and Spidey doesn't feel powerful enough to take them out reliably. Despite all that, I still enjoyed my time with the DS version. I definitely liked it more than Amazing Allies, but not quite as much as the main version of Web of Shadows.
So, to summarize, if you're gonna play any version of Web of Shadows, stick with the main version. And maybe, if you can find it, even pick up the DS version. But, stay away from this hot piece of garbage.